was doing a show casting for Jean-Paul Gaultier.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember walking in, and this guy walked before me, and he walked in and he shook my hand, and I was like, oh, hi.
Yeah.
Like, wow, he's really friendly. I was like, and he shook everybody's hand, which is not common. And then he walked like a boss.
Yeah.
His shoulders were back. He was present. He was strong. He looked at everybody that was judging him walk, and then he walked out. And I was like, wow. And it never left my mind because of how he presented himself.
Yeah.
The energy was there before he opened his mouth.
Yeah.
That is confidence.
Yeah.
Confidence isn't loud and obnoxious and in your face, look at me. It can be subtle. It's a presence. It's an energy. It's like, I already trust myself. I don't need your approval.
Yeah.
And as I walk in here, I've already won because I don't need to be fed by you.
Welcome to the Alive and Aligned podcast, a show dedicated to helping you live a life of truth and share your fullest gifts with the world. I'm your host, Pete Byrne, and I'm here to open your mind to new perspectives, to introduce you to some epic humans who are already out there living their deepest truth. So now just grounding in, taking a breath, letting go of anything you're still holding onto from today, and just opening up to receiving this episode now. Let's dive on in. Emile Steenveld is an emotional intelligence coach and mentor who draws from a wide background of modalities including yoga, hypnotherapy, reiki, and somatic therapy. Emile began his personal development journey during his time as a professional model. As he moved into the cutthroat modeling industry, he recognized how he was suppressing and sabotaging his success because of a lack of confidence and a fear of rejection. But over time, as he spent more and more time around all of these beautiful models, he realized that many of them were completely insecure and felt not enough inside. This realization sparked his curiosity and set him on a path to discover what is the secret to true confidence beyond external validation. And that's something that we really dive into in this episode. So, as Emile went down the path of self-development within the modeling industry, he brought communication and people skills into his work, and he focused on how his first impressions and his confident demeanour would set him apart from the crowd and make him 1 in 1,000 in that industry. And he later naturally then transitioned into the personal development space, where for years he has now been helping people to overcome the same challenges he faced by teaching them how to build confidence, regulate their emotions, heal their wounds, and communicate effectively. In this episode, we go on quite the journey exploring a wide range of juicy topics, including what is emotional intelligence and how can we cultivate more of it in our lives? What's the secret to confidence learned from Emile's many years working in the modeling industry? How can you listen deeper to the signals of your body and overcome burnout? How we can deal with triggers and turn them into life lessons. And finally, how to guide others from integrity instead of from a place of ego. And why do people spiritually bypass? This was a really fun episode with Emile. We went super deep, and I'm really excited to introduce you to him. Enjoy the show. Mr. Steenveld, welcome to the Alive and Aligned podcast.
Thank you, mate.
How you feeling today?
Pretty chill, pretty relaxed.
Yeah, you look it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to going in and seeing what comes out.
Seeing what comes out. You just got back to Bali 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
How does it feel?
A bit chaotic.
Sure.
Getting used to it. Bali changes so fast. And I've been here 7 years now.
Wow.
And it's constantly changing. Like, you can go for like 3 weeks and you come back and there's a building. So
yeah, totally.
It's definitely...
They don't go slow. Like, they really go for it when they want to put something up.
It's definitely changing at a rapid pace.
And what does that mean for you in terms of here as a home and here as a base?
I'm actually still toying with the idea. Like, my lease is ending in April, and I'm either thinking I might go up to Uluwatu for something different. Mm-hmm. I actually just got back from Portugal as well. I was there for 2.5 months. Nice. Exploring different parts of that, trying to see what my next chapter is going to be. Nice. Let's talk about some of the previous chapters. Yes. Let's go there.
Yeah. So we'll skip the small talk and get into the good stuff. Tell me about let's go with like the 3 most influential people that have guided you along your path to today.
Ooh. I would say my first ever yoga teacher. This guy was from Sri Lanka. He basically taught me proper yoga, not just like doing asanas and stretching on the mat, but the philosophy of yoga.
Yeah.
He influenced me so much to the point where I was doing yoga 5 days a week. I was reading up on philosophy of Buddhism. I was learning how to be really present with my body. That led me to also doing the coaching, learning to understand how to do the breath, being a yoga teacher. But it really led me down the fact that like everything you can do on the mat is a reflection of what's happening off the mat. And when I started to understand that, everything shifted. Because how you do one thing is how you do most things. And when I became a yoga teacher, that taught me how to just watch people and just, I could tell exactly how people show up by how they show up on the mat.
Sure.
Right? If you could lay in a corpse pose, which is like Shavasana, where they laid, and some people had to move or couldn't be still, it's like usually that person was constantly on the go in real life. Can't be still, don't want to sit with their emotions, don't like to be bored. So that was one. The second one, who's the second one that influenced me? I would say my first coaching mentor. He really taught me how to show up and how not to show up. Originally started off great, was my mentor, taught me some of the most amazing life lessons, how to show up for clients, how to support a client, how to coach properly. But then when we became business partners, I noticed there was a different side. And this is where I talk about the spiritual ego. Sure. Which is actually even worse than the normal ego, I believe, right? Because the spiritual ego is almost, it's like it's like the normal ego on steroids. And
extra entitlement.
Extra entitlement. Like
powered by the divine.
Yeah. Has done extra amount of ayahuasca ceremonies, is constantly judging, constantly looking to ways to show that it's superior. Yeah. And this is the dark part about coaching and even the personal development industry, is that the more we learn, the more we grow, the sneakier the ego becomes. Yeah. And I got to learn it firsthand with two of my first mentors, which was my yoga teacher and my first coach. And you said before, with great light comes great darkness and great responsibility, and it's the same thing. And I think as I've been in this industry for now 12 years, you have to learn to manage your ego, because your ego will start to manage you. And how we see ourselves when we are supporting people to go through certain journeys, and not taking that on as like, look what I did. Sure. I'm amazing. Yeah. Versus, hey, I was a guide and I was there to support you throughout that journey, but you did the work. I just facilitated the process. Yeah. And both of those teachers were extremely important because they were amazing teachers, right? My first yoga teacher, probably to this day, is still probably one of the best yoga classes I've ever done. And I'm not saying where he just tells you to do postures, but I'm saying he would speak into philosophy when you're doing the postures and get you to think deeper. And no one has ever been able to hit me that deep before. But on the other side of that, I saw a side where it was nasty. It was jealous and cunning. It was cruel. It was gossip. And all the teachings that I was learning from him, I started to realize, I was like, wait, what's happening? Yeah. And I ended up pulling back. And I think both of those lessons, the reason why I had to go through both of those situations was for me to learn how to speak up and own my own power and trust myself more. Totally. Yeah. So it's been one of those things that it's a beautiful thing, and also can be a painful thing. But through the pain is the breakthrough. The breakdown comes the breakthrough. Totally. And then the learning that comes after that. Yeah.
That's two.
All right, third one. My third biggest influence. I would say my meditation teacher. Yeah. He showed me how transcendental meditation, by the way.
TM.
Yep. And he showed me how transcendental meditation can really get you to be with your emotions, sit with it without judgment. And by sitting with that daily on a consistent basis, and can calm your whole nervous system. And I think when I met him, I was just going through quite a rough breakup at the time, and really was in turmoil. Like, I was grieving. I didn't know what to do. The relationship was quite toxic. It pretty much destroyed me, that relationship. Like, I would say my confidence was broken. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was doing next. I was kind of lost. And when I found him, he had this unique way of just expressing and explaining the teachings. And when you can teach and simplify the teachings of something that's quite complicated, and make it easy for you to grasp, that's a sign of a great teacher.
Sure.
So he really did influence how I saw myself. He got me to really sit with my emotions and sit with that on a consistent basis. I started doing that 20 minutes a day, twice a day. Yeah. And it was like my thing. Like, I got everybody starting it. Once I start something and I love it, I'm like, everybody's going to try this. Right?
Yeah.
And it still to this day is like something that I do every day.
Yeah.
I still do have my mantra. And my mantra is for me to just... Well, a mantra is a vehicle to free the mind. This is the way he explains it. And by repeating the mantra back to myself, it's like I'm on this journey. And I'm on this journey, and I imagine I'm on this journey. I've got my bike, and every time I sit in my meditation, I hop on the bike and I get back on the journey. Yeah. And I come across and I come off the bike, and then I might fall off the bike a few times, but then I come back in and I reconnect with myself. And that's the most important relationship we can cultivate, is with ourselves. And when we start to look into those places without judgment, without making it mean anything, and just allowing it just to be there. All right, I'm seeing the thought. This is what's happening. This is what I'm noticing. This is not bad. This is not good, which is really hard sometimes, right? Sure. Because we're meaning-making machines.
Totally.
It's then where we can witness and be a witness to these thoughts, these feelings, these emotions, and allow them to pass through us. And there's going to be days where we're going to be in our shit. Like, I woke up today, I was literally in my shit. And I was like, wow, I feel really heavy. And I noticed it, and I noticed the thoughts, and it was like almost like a bombardment of different things. Now, I've been doing this practice for more than 12 years now, and I still can get caught up, right? It's totally normal. And I noticed how it was quite heavy, and it was coming from different angles, and that's what usually will happen. It was like, this is happening here, and this will trigger you, and that would trigger you, and then someone will message you, and that triggers you, and everything's triggering.
Then it just fills up the capacity at a certain point. We're just like overwhelmed.
Yeah. And I noticed I was in that space today, and I have I'm in a men's group, and I have an accountability coach, and I remember him saying to me, we had a deal, because we have to keep each other accountable every day. And we have a deal that if you're in your shit, you call me. Yeah. And if I'm in my shit, I'll call you. Yeah. And I noticed it, and I was like, no, I'm going to be fine. I'm just going to go to the gym. I'm just going to go and work out and go in the sauna. And then I was like, no, Emile, we had a deal, right? And my usual self would be like, no, I'll just handle it myself. Because normally I'm the person to be there for other people. Yeah. But do I allow myself to be able to receive?
To be held.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was big. And I did that. I called him up. I said, hey, I'm in my shit.
Yeah.
If you got some free time, hit me up. Otherwise, we can talk tomorrow or the next day. He said, no, we can talk now. I was like, okay.
Shit.
And as much as you want to avoid it, I knew in my body that something needed to be released.
Yeah.
And I remember he's great. He held space for me. We talked about what's happening, and he did a little exercise, which was great, and allowed me to release and release sadness and cry, and excuse me, to be seen.
Yeah.
And it was so nice, Pete, because it just felt like I could just release this heaviness from my shoulders that I've been carrying, and it's almost like like I said, I was saying earlier, the ego that tries to keep us looking good and keep us looking perfect. And that's exhausting.
Yeah.
It really is.
Totally.
So it allowed me just to release, to allow tears, to allow sadness to come up, and to be seen, and not judge it.
Yeah.
And after I finished, it was great. I felt relief, and it shifted, it moved. Just like that.
And here we are.
Exactly.
That's epic, man. Thank you. So it sounds like he's like the honorary fourth in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
There you go. He's like the more recent one. Epic. Thank you for that. I love that as an intro into, like, instead of just starting with the bio and the stats, you know, like to give a bit more of a window into like the people who've influenced you. And that, I think, even in you describing those things, we start to get a bit of a window into, like, you know, who you are and what it is that lights you up.
Yeah.
So maybe let's go for the stats now. Like, what would you define yourself as? You know, the extended elevator pitch.
It's a really funny question. Like, who am I?
Who
right?
am I?
Who am I? Who are you? It's funny. I've done so many different trainings and methods of healing, because I don't believe there's one way of healing.
Many windows into the same house.
Absolutely. And I think I prefer to use different methods.
Yeah.
Because not everyone is going to respond the same to the same method.
Totally.
So, like I said earlier, I started off as a yoga teacher. I did my coaching. I've done NLP, timeline therapy, hypnotherapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, reiki, theta healing, somatics, experiential learning, and I still am like, what am I?
Yeah, sure.
You know? And
a human.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. Some people go, well, you're a coach, but then other people go, well, you're actually doing a lot of healing work, because I love to go to the core.
Yeah, sure.
But I like practical.
Yeah.
So I like to use practical ways of healing and coaching.
Yeah.
And also switching it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So combining it.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to say who is Emile, like, you know, everybody would know, like, okay, he's an emotional intelligence coach, right? Why emotional intelligence?
Yeah, what does that even mean?
Yeah, emotional intelligence is understanding your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, understanding how to self-regulate, how to be with those emotions, especially when you're triggered.
Yeah.
Understanding to be like let me sit with it, let me feel it, let me nurture it versus let me suppress it.
Yeah, like what you did earlier.
Yes.
Let it come through.
Absolutely.
Let it.
Now, most of us would ignore it, push it down, take a vice. Maybe it's a cigarette, maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's a drug, maybe it's binge watching TV.
Yeah.
So emotional intelligence for me is teaching you how to deal with these very subtle nuances.
Yeah.
Because that's what they are,
Yeah.
right? Most people don't even understand the difference between an emotion and a feeling. And when you think about that, a feeling is something where I'm conscious, like, oh, I notice I'm hot today. Like, I'm conscious of that feeling.
Yeah.
You walk into a room, oh, it's quite cold, or oh, it's a bit weird in here, right? You're conscious of those feelings. But an emotion can be unconscious and conscious.
Yeah.
So you could walk into a room and you're like, oh, I feel a bit weird in here, or the energy's weird, but you don't know why yet.
Yeah.
Right?
But you could be feeling good, but why are you feeling good? What's the emotion underneath that?
Exactly. Yeah. So your body's already picking up on these cues before you even notice and actually are conscious of what the cue is. Now, the more emotionally intelligent you are, the more you start to inquire. Oh, I noticed I got triggered about that. Ooh, I noticed when I walked into this room, oh, the energy was a bit weird. Oh, I'm noticing, that person's, maybe they're a bit loud, or they're a bit crazy, and I'm not feeling as comfortable, or maybe I'm feeling anxious. Most people don't even understand that they're actually anxious. Yeah. Or socially awkward. Yeah. Right? And what to do with that? They're just like, I don't really like to go out. But why don't you like to go out? Yeah. Why don't you like big crowds? Like, what are you noticing?
Yeah. What's happening under the hood?
Exactly. So yeah, that's basically what I do.
So you help people become less emotionally unintelligent.
Yes. I teach people how to become more confident in themselves, and what that looks like is trust, right?
Trust
Because in themselves, right? Because everybody wants confidence. You think about it, confidence is that much.
Tip of the iceberg.
Trust is the bottom pillar, right? Without trust, the confidence won't happen.
Yeah.
Right? How do you become confident in anything you do? You play the guitar, right? You didn't become confident until you started to learn and practice consistently, right?
Yeah, totally.
And you were like, oh, I know the keys. Now I don't even need to look. I already trust myself.
Yes.
Then the confidence starts to come, right?
Unless there's some kind of limiting belief suppressing it. We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
Yes. Just keep it PG for now.
Yeah.
So a little bit about maybe, you mentioned confidence there.
Yeah.
And you mentioned before when we were chatting that you've had quite a journey with this concept of confidence, okay? So maybe tell us a little bit about your backstory and how the different versions of this word have come into your life.
Yeah, so straight up, I never considered myself as confident. I was considered shy.
Sure.
And, you think about shy, I used it as an excuse because I actually wasn't confident. And only really when I started to know this is when I got offered opportunities to do things. And if I wasn't good at it, or if I knew I wasn't going to win or succeed, then I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Right? So I stayed safe.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was about 18 or 19, maybe it was 18. I think it was about 18. And I got asked to do a fashion show. And I remember I was 17, I got asked to do a fashion show. And I remember shitting myself.
Sure.
And I was scared. I was like, oh my God, there's going to be heaps of people out there. And I remember doing the show. I was 17. I was in a club. My sister was in the show as well, hence why I got in.
Yeah.
And I remember doing the show, and it was this weird feeling because, one, I had no idea what to expect. There was a whole bunch of people out there. And then I remember walking out, and everyone was there, and my heart was beating like, ba-boom, ba-boom. Like, you know how you're out of your body almost.
Sure,
I'm like, oh gosh, I can't even feel my body.
Yeah.
And I remember doing it, but then I finished the second time walking again and changing and then going out again and then finished, but feeling this exhilarating feeling all over. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, what was that?
Yeah.
And it was one of the first times I really became conscious that it was like I was out of my comfort zone. And I did it. And I got asked to do it again at another club. And we did it. And again, it was the same feeling. And then I became more comfortable in it.
Yeah.
But I still didn't have an agency. And then I finally went to see an agency and they rejected me. And then I realized, here's the lesson. I was afraid of rejection. So what does the universe do? The universe says, hey, Emile, you're afraid of rejection. Yeah, let me present you with
a whole load of rejection.
An opportunity. And if you get through this, then you will actually come out on the other side, because on the other side of that is your freedom.
Yeah.
And I remember going to an agency. It was one of the top agencies in Australia. And I got rejected. And then I went and saw another agency and they said they'll take me on. But I still was holding on to the rejection before that.
Yeah.
And I was like, nah, I don't want to do this. 3 years pass, I keep getting asked, Emile, can you do this? And I was like, no. I just need to get a little bit more bigger, a bit more muscly. Basically, I'm making every excuse under the sun as to why I couldn't and why I have to perfect it. Because if I perfect it, Pete, there's going to be less chance of me getting rejected.
Yeah, totally.
So was I wrong? Was I wrong? Because I finally get an agency. It's a small agency. And that small agency, I get pictures done, and okay, I'm like, yes, I'm a model now. I have a book, but I'm not really working yet.
Yeah.
Then I have pictures with a test photographer, and then he shoots me with one of these models from the big agency that I got rejected from. They see my pictures and they're like, who's this guy?
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden I go in for them, and then they take me on, and it starts, and I take it on like an industry, like anything. Like, I'm like, if I was to become the top model, how would I show up? What are the top models doing? So I looked, because success leaves clues. And I looked at every magazine. How are they posing? What's this? Oh, you have to have a good body. You have to have confidence, blah, 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 blah. But what is confidence? Like, when I rock up to a casting and none of the models even talk to you, let alone look you in the eye, is that confidence? It's not. And I remember being at a few castings and I was like, wow, models are actually so insecure.
Yeah.
Like, extremely insecure. Like, everyone acts like, oh yeah, they're so beautiful and this and that. But like, we were constantly being judged from what you look like. And if you haven't done the inner work on yourself, that is debilitating.
Yeah.
Like, you will constantly feel not enough, right? And that's what I was at the start. I didn't feel enough. So that's why I was like, let me do this and get this validation from that side. And the more validation I get, the more I feel worthy and I feel loved. And look at me, I'm praised.
Sure.
And that took me all over the world. And I remember being in a place in Hong Kong at the time. And I was doing a show casting for Jean-Paul Gaultier. And I remember walking in, and this guy walked before me, and he walked in and he shook my hand, and I was like, oh, hi.
Yeah.
Like, wow, he's really friendly. I was like, and he shook everybody's hand, which is not common. And then he walked like a boss.
Yeah.
His shoulders were back, he was present, he was strong. He looked at everybody that was judging him walk, and then he walked out, and I was like, wow. And it never left my mind because of how he presented himself.
Yeah.
The energy was there before he opened his mouth.
Yeah.
That is confidence.
Yeah.
Confidence isn't loud and obnoxious and in your face, look at me. It can be subtle. It's a presence, it's an energy. It's like, I already trust myself. I don't need your approval.
Yeah.
And as I walk in here, I've already won because I don't need to be fed by you. So that started me on the process of like, that's how I'm going to show up from now on. What does that look like? All right, nobody's my enemy. And my motto was, I'm not competing against anybody but myself.
Yeah.
The only person I need to win against is the person I was yesterday. How can I become better? How can I grow? How can I evolve? So in those moments, that's when I started reading already on self-development. I started reading on people skills because I was going to be like, if I'm 1 out of 200 models, what's going to be the difference between me and 200 other people?
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure you remember me. And that was starting by how I communicate, shake your hand, how present I am.
Yeah.
How do I open up conversation? I got 5 seconds to make an impression on you. How am I going to do that? So this is where it started to learn from like the inside out. And the more confident I got in my communication, my ability to connect, the more I could, boom, let me pull this across on camera. So yeah, confidence.
It's like, it's like funny looking back at the journey and how you've transitioned now into like that one guy, we'll say, like sparked something maybe, which then led to like, oh, okay, I can learn these skills, right? There's a deeper desire because of the, what's at the end of the rainbow from that, which is epic. And so on that journey then, in terms of stepping into this world of communication, what have been some of the most powerful tools or skills, like the most important pieces in terms of how we communicate?
Well, when I think about communication, I think about why are we trying to communicate? What are we trying to get from communication? Like, why is communication so important, right? Everybody says you should communicate, but like nobody knows how. And I think the biggest thing for me was going, where do I feel blocked in my communication? Right? And as a man, one of the reasons why I'm an emotional intelligence coach is because I was quite terrible with my emotions. I didn't know how to express. I would shut down as soon as I felt trauma or stress. If I had my partner and we were arguing, boom, I'd go into shutdown mode and not know what is going on. Right? And it was a common theme, like, why aren't you saying anything? It's because I didn't know what to say or how to say it. Right? And so for me, that's what sparked the communication. Like, how do I communicate? What is actually happening in my body? And how can I actually tell myself that I'm safe when I'm expressing myself? Right? And this is when I started to look into deeper parts of myself where I was like, where did I stop expressing? Where have I restricted myself? Where did I not feel safe? And these are the kind of questions I had to ask myself to then go to the other side of communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would always go, okay, well, where do I feel restricted? Where am I not expressing? Where am I not saying things because I'm a fear of rejection?
Mm-hmm.
And it comes back to the same thing when what I feared when I was modeling. Didn't want to be rejected.
Yeah.
Right? And if I can accept myself, Pete, and accept all of the things, even the darkness,
Mm-hmm.
the things I don't like about myself, the things that I don't tell people about myself, then, only then, I can come from a genuine place of communicating, not to get something, not for approval, but to communicate, to connect.
Totally.
And that's the difference.
And when it comes to navigating challenging situations, you mentioned like fighting with a girlfriend, for instance. How have you found communication to be like effective communication to steer through those situations, those potentially challenging things that many people want to avoid?
I'm definitely a processor. So I like to process things first.
Yeah.
Rather than just say. So if I feel like I'm noticing I'm getting triggered within my own self, then I'll notice the trigger. I'll notice where my breath is, and I'll be like, okay, and I'll ask myself, what's triggering me about this situation? And when I ask that question, it gets me to dig deeper into, the way she said this, or the way she did this, or the way maybe she spoke to me in a certain way, or maybe it was tone, or maybe it was the way she asked me. Or maybe it was in the situation, who was around when she said it, like it could have been a number of different things. So when we ask and inquire, then we can go, okay, well, this triggered me because of this. Well, and what is actually a trigger? Trigger is a wound.
Yeah.
So what wound is getting poked right now, right? And so many of us are unconscious to our wounds, but we get triggered and we're like, oh,
you did that to me.
You make me feel like this. And I'm like, yo. And one of my pet peeves, like in relationship is projecting. Yeah. So I am so conscious about not projecting, because it's not fair, and I take a lot of responsibility for almost sometimes too much responsibility.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like, but it's understanding that it's like, okay, what in me is being triggered, and then that is my ticket to freedom.
Yes.
So I'm always like, oh, I felt a trigger. Where did that come from? Where did that first start? How does that make me feel? Cool. How can I be with that? How can I nurture that? Yeah. Versus, you made me feel like this. This is terrible.
You're a bad person. It's happening right now in this moment.
You're a bad person. And of course, sometimes I'm going to react. I'm not this perfect angel because I know emotional intelligence. I know. I mean, it could be, but it's one of those things where I need to honor the anger sometimes as well, because anger is also a necessary response. And so many of us don't honor it. I especially didn't. Yeah. I was afraid of it because I'm like, if I ever become angry or if I show anger, that means that I'm not lovable, right? Because that's how my father showed up. And every time he did, my mother would say, look, you're angry, your father's losing his shit again. Yeah. Look at him. He's an asshole.
Yeah, that's a bad thing.
I was like, don't be like that.
Yeah.
Then I didn't allow anger. And when you don't allow an emotion, it's like saying, I want to be happy, but I only want to be a little bit annoyed. I don't want to show too much anger. But really, you're bullshitting yourself. Right? And it's inauthentic. And you're being inauthentic to yourself. Yeah. And then there's that tug of war that happens. Because you're like, I'm showing up, I'm trying to be the best, but you're not being real. Yeah. But subconsciously, we don't even know this.
There's this like spectrum I like to talk about where, people might say, here's me, like I'm like, let's say pleasing or nice. And then there's like normal, here on my left hand. And they're like, oh, I'm probably in the middle somewhere, Like I'm not too people pleasing, but I'm not like fully normal with boundaries and stuff. Yeah. But we forget that there's this whole other side of the spectrum, So if we take anger at the other end of the spectrum, if I've rejected anger completely and totally, then I've also rejected all the positive qualities that can come with that spectrum, such as assertiveness and boundaries and power. Because if I've suppressed my anger, then I've also suppressed my power.
And so many of us do it. Yeah, totally. Because we label it that bad thing.
And it all gets boxed up and packaged and thrown away.
And if you can use anger at the right time, for the right moment, it's a superpower. Totally. Because it shows you to be like, okay, this is my power, but also I'm not going to hold on to it. But in the past, I would get angry, but then feel regret or shame.
Yes, spiral.
Yeah. because it's like, oh, I shouldn't have been like that. But it's like you have a right to be like that.
Totally.
Also.
Totally.
Yeah.
I love what you said before about finding like there being almost like that's the gold, like when you find a trigger, you know. And the way I like to describe this is like when you've got your iPhone and you've got all those apps running in the background, and some of them you haven't maybe opened for weeks or months maybe, or in this case years. So when we experience a situation that reminds us of the last time we experienced, in this case, that emotion or this kind of experience, it opens that app from maybe years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing is that if we haven't updated our software, then probably we're opening an old version of the app, which just crashes everything. And it just overwhelms the whole system. So in being able to go in and through different practices, which we can get into in a bit as well, but like close off those apps. For instance, for me, breathwork is something that's really good for that, closing off the apps in the background.
Yeah.
We get to go back and integrate these things. That's where we get to then show up in the present moment. And I've also found that the more triggers that we can actually dive into and integrate means that we get even more ninja about spotting the triggers. And then it almost becomes like a fun, like Easter egg hunt. Like, ooh, there's a good one, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and it's funny because obviously you've been seeing me a lot more in your circles with breath work. And,
Sure, yeah.
And I've loved it. Absolutely loved it. And when I think about breath work, for me, it's like it's the next step for me to go even deeper within myself. I've done different breath work with different people, but and it's been amazing shifts, but also it drained me.
Yeah.
Almost to the point where I'm like, I'm non-functional.
Yeah.
Right? And then I've done breath work probably, with Ed and
Sure.
Laura and of course you.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel the same wipe.
Sure.
I'm not wiped out.
Yeah.
And what I noticed so much about the breath is that it allows us, and it's funny because I knew this because I did yoga.
Sure.
Right? Because yoga means to yoke, to connect the body with the breath.
Mm-hmm.
So every movement is paired with
Yes.
a breath.
Yeah.
And that's what allowed me to see different things with people on the yoga mat.
You see the patterns, yeah.
Absolutely. But when you're coaching, you can also notice like someone's breath changes. Oh, they notice that. Oh, stop. Oh, what was that? Okay, I said something that triggered something up.
Yeah.
You're holding your breath.
Tightening,
there.
yeah.
So, you're looking for those cues as well. But with breath work, what I've loved about it is the ability to have permission to go to the deepest core parts of yourself, which you don't even know is actually going to come up, by the way.
Yes.
Which I love because I still don't understand it. Because my mind is so analytical and trying to find I know they're doing this part there, and then they're doing this part, like, because I've done so many different therapies and healings and stuff.
Yeah.
So for me to switch off and not know is beautiful.
Yes.
Right? Because it goes past my mind.
Yeah.
And it goes directly into my body, and then you guys can just guide where the breath is coming from and where to navigate that.
Yeah.
And I've had such profound shifts, and when we can have such profound shifts and allow ourselves to fully release and fully let go and cry or scream or allow yourself to be held and supported in different parts of your body.
Yeah.
It's like when we were children, it's like you're getting this nurturing effect.
Yeah.
Right? And for me, what's been beautiful about this process is that once you go there, and you can go to that uncomfortable part, which you actually didn't even know you were subconsciously not wanting to go.
Yes.
When you open up to the real life again, you don't have the same reaction.
That's confidence, mate.
And it is, exactly. Because your breath is like, I'm totally fine here. I've gone to the depth.
And conquered.
Yeah. And be seen and being seen and be held.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
Yeah.
And
I'm still alive.
And I'm still alive. And to be a teacher, and like I said, even though I've been in the industry for about 12 years, and to let go of those, I'm not a teacher here. I'm a student.
Yeah.
To be a student and just to let go of that, I'm nothing. I'm just going to breathe here.
Yeah.
And to be fully supported, that's the growth. That's the beauty of it. And so for me, I'm excited, man. I'm excited to go deeper with it, to witness it, to understand it.
Yeah. I've been doing it for 3 years, mate, and I'm definitely still a student, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's the way it is. It's tapping into something that like is beyond the mind, because every time I show up in a one-on-one session or in a group event, I see things I've never seen before. And the knowledge deepens, you know, and it's funny because like with facilitating breathwork, and just to speak to like what connected breathwork and what it is, like it's really hot, particularly with like Wim Hof at the moment. Like there's a lot of people talking about breathwork, and there's the tool of connected breathwork is kind of can be used as a hammer, you know, as a sledgehammer, like is maybe what you experience coming in, and we just fucking go for it, you know, and see what happens. And people start screaming and crying, and it's like, well, something good happened. Look, you were crying, you know, and well, I didn't cry for years, so that's a good thing. But a lot of that isn't actually honoring the nervous system, which is something you mentioned before, and it's kind of like. I suppose the approach that maybe you've experienced that you said feels a bit different, and what I've trained in is one that's actually about training the body's ability to be in heightened or challenging situations and stay centered and regulated, and find that groundedness in that moment, you know, which means that, you know, we're expanding and pushing what's called a window of tolerance. So how much stress or challenge can I be under and still remain like fully just with it, you know? And then after, how can we drop down into a deep relaxation state quickly? So within 2 minutes, I can shift from being massively activated to deeply relaxed. So when I come home for a really stressful day, how quick can I drop into like full like rest and digest mode? And it's a muscle. It's like going to the gym. You know, if you've never bench pressed before and you try to rack on a load of weights, it's not going to go too well. But if you've been building that over time, then when you sit down at the bench press, you're probably going to be able to push some weight. So when you come home from work and you've trained while in an altered state, while your body's malleable and accepts the shifts and changes that you make more easily, when you've been able to train your body to quickly shift and remain in a deep parasympathetic relaxed state, then it just feels normal.
That's,
you know,
a superpower.
It's cool.
Yeah.
And particularly nowadays when, and look, I'm no angel myself, like, you know, with the, you know, the screens and constantly been on, and there's so many things happening, particularly here in Bali. It's like, it's like a fucking playground, you know? So it's like having those tools is not just like a nice thing, it's a necessity these days, particularly for, if we are people, I believe, who are following like a purposeful life and doing things that are important in the world, then these tools become even more like mandatory in order to be able to show up in the ways that we do, because we can't afford to have a burnout, you know?
Well, it's interesting you say burnout, because it's people are burning out faster and faster.
Totally.
People's serotonin levels are dropping faster and faster. People's focus levels are dropping faster and faster. And things are getting faster and faster, especially with TikTok and Reels and this, and it has to be quick, and you've got to do short changes. And how many times people, like, I'm starting a YouTube channel and I'm studying it, and the amount of things you need to do to keep people's attention. Yeah. But then also at the same time, you're like, wow, this is nuts, right? Yeah. And it's like the little tricks that everything is set up, and it's set up for us to be on the screens, unfortunately. And we don't breathe during certain situations. When we're watching certain things, it's like I remember my ex saying she wants to watch a horror movie, but she doesn't want to watch it alone. And I'm like, why would you do that to yourself? Yeah. I'm like, I don't want to be like, I don't want my nervous system to be all over the place. I was like, I don't want to watch this. Like, this isn't fun to me, right? Yeah. And it's understanding that, and it's really checking into your body and going, what is going to stress my nervous system out, and how am I going to feel after this? Yeah. And is this going to be beneficial for my health, or is this going to take away and drain my energy, you know? And I think we need to really check in with our bodies more often, because it's smarter than we play out to be. Like, we're constantly in our minds. And, you know, one of the biggest lessons I learned a couple of years ago when I did ayahuasca was the lesson I got, was pay attention to how you feel. What's your body telling you? And it came as simple as this. The guy offered me a cup of ayahuasca. I said, cool. I had one. I'm super sensitive. I don't drink coffee. I don't drink alcohol. I was the first one to purge. And then he's offering a second cup. And he says, come off if you want a second cup. I said, how do you know if you want a second cup? He's like, ask your heart. And I was like, oh, how simple. I was like, right. And I didn't get a second cup.
Yeah.
And what I took from that, Pete, was that I'm going to do that with everything. Check in. How do I feel after I meet with this person? Do I feel like my energy is going through the roof? Do I feel excited, or do I feel tired? Do I feel drained?
Yeah.
After I eat a meal, after I drink something, how do I feel? Do I feel good, or do I feel not good? And so many of us do this thing. We go through the phases of, I'm just meeting with some friends, I'll just have a few drinks, even though you know you're not going to feel good.
Yeah.
I'm just doing it just to be in the social space. And for me, that was my biggest lesson, is like, trust yourself more. Listen to your body. What's it telling you? It's always communicating. It's always giving us signals.
Yeah.
But most of the time, the reason why we go into burnout is because we're ignoring the signs.
Yeah.
We're ignoring the boundaries. We're pushing.
Yeah.
We feel tired, then we drink coffee.
Yeah.
We feel more tired, let's drink more coffee.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's eventually it's going to get to a point where you're going to have irreversible damage.
Yeah. This has been something that I've explored a lot in the last year. A lot of the kind of people who've, you could say, randomly turned up on my doorstep have been entrepreneurs who have achieved a level of success and then realized that it wasn't going to make them happy, like more cash basically. And often, like, the hypothesis I have about that as to why someone would drive themselves to that state, and it's something that I did as well, actually, back when I was a musician. And I think 2016 was the year of like my big, like, I literally had a breakdown on stage, you know, just pushing. And it was these agreements that I'd made with myself. Like, I needed to show up in a certain way, and my self-image I'd built around being this identity and this person, you know, that doesn't quit, that doesn't let people down, like, you know. But specifically with, if we drop down the levels in the basement when it comes to burnout, and if you're someone who's experienced a burnout or something like it, then this might land. I believe it's coming from a place of, there's like almost like a nuclear reactor deep in the system, okay? Like an old wound, usually something around I'm not enough. Could be my dad never accepted me for who I am, or my mom never loved me, or whatever it is. But this deep desire that's been anchored to external success of, if I do this, then it will quench and get rid of this deep this energy, feeling. This burning feeling inside. And the short-term hits quell it enough to be like, oh, this feels good, let's continue in that direction. And at a certain point, we've invested so much of our life force and time and energy and resources in, like, we're all in, you know, and just got to keep grinding and, like, just forget about the things that we know, like, even though the warning signs are there. Because, like, you know, we've already put our house on red, so we may as well put a bit more on, take a loan out, you know, loan out that energy that we don't have.
Just to get fed, It's perpetual.
It's a hard, like, fall from grace, that one. But I believe that a lot of us, or at least I can speak for myself, like, I needed to feel that. I think a lot of people do. You know, they need to feel what the bottom of the barrel feels like in order to know, like, not to do that again.
Yeah, and I think it's part of entrepreneurship as well. You know, when you think about entrepreneurship, it's going to be the heights. You're going to have lows, you're going to have highs, and it's part of the journey. And I think it's about also understanding that it is a marathon, not a race. Yeah. And I think some of us get so caught up in, like, this month, this next quarterly, versus, like, let's spread it out to 3 years or 5 years. What's your 5-year plan? Not like yearly plan. And so many of us are constantly looking over our shoulder, looking at what they're doing, comparing.
The highlight reels.
And the constant comparing, constant numbers. And even in the coaching industry, you're seeing more and more these days that it's like, I just did $100,000 a month. Or I just did this. And then you're like, wow, what am I not doing? Or how come I'm not making that kind of thing? And then you're taking away from your journey again. Remember the marathon versus the race. And some people will sacrifice their health for the accolades. And I always say to myself, Pete, I want to make it, but I want to make it with my health, which is real wealth. Right? Because if I get there and I'm burnt out and I can't sleep and I'm all over the place and I can't even be present with you, like, I'm here with you but I'm not really, then have I really made it? Right?
Totally.
Because what is wealth? Right? If I can't even be present with what I created. if I can't be present with my children, if I can't be present with my wife, if I can't be present with my friends and the people that I love, then is that really wealth?
Have you won? You mentioned you were starting a YouTube channel.
Yes.
Tell me a bit more about that.
So it's really interesting, right? Because it's I'll just say it's interesting. Go follow me.
I'm not biased.
It's really good.
Yeah, it's really shit. My YouTube.
It's great. It's something I've avoided for years when I've been told many times, like, you should do it, you should do it.
Sure.
And again, YouTube is a long-term
It's a long game.
Yeah. Right? And I really am taking it like that because it is something where it's not like Instagram, like instant
validation.
I make a video and then 3 days later it's gone. This video could last 5-10 years, maybe longer. And there's one thing that is quite funny is because I hate talking. I used to hate talking in front of a camera. Like,
you're doing a good job.
No, like this is fine. This is totally fine. Like if I'm getting asked questions, it's totally fine. But if I have to speak in front of a camera and directly talk, I'm like blah, 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 blah. Like I become tongue twisted. I think too much. And I really had to change the identity and the belief around, like, what am I teaching? Who's this for? And how can I do this in the most simple manner and have fun with it? So it just in itself is transformational for me, because me deciding it is going, okay, well, I've just shot my first 6 videos. They've been edited, and like I have a proper studio in my house. Like I have everything. I have no excuse not to shoot, right?
But yet all the excuses.
Yeah. So now it's just about going, how can I make sure that I'm shooting at least 2 videos a week? And the channel is about emotional intelligence for entrepreneurs. And the 4 pillars are: we discuss confidence, we work on how to have tough conversations and communicate.
Yeah.
Freedom, what does it mean to be free within yourself and have full self-expression, because that's where real freedom is.
Yeah.
And the last one is emotional intelligence. Did I say emotional intelligence?
Well, that was the channel.
Oh, yes. No, but it is also, that is
one of the pillars as well.
Is emotional intelligence. And I believe that if you, as an entrepreneur, even as anyone, if you can master those 4 pillars, you will have an amazing, inspiring, fulfilling life.
Totally.
And I feel like there's so many umbrellas that could be talked about in this channel. And it's really exciting to come and bring out the creative side of it, to go, okay, like, how can I tell this story and become a storyteller and really get my point across in a way that is going to leave the audience going, you know what, I really got great facts about this. I can apply this, and it's practical, and I can actually use it straight away.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Give us those 4 again. Emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence, freedom, confidence, and how to have tough conversations. So communication.
What would you say, as an entrepreneur, are the 3 toughest types of conversations to have?
One, I would say, if you're an entrepreneur and you've got a team and someone comes at you and personally attacks you, right? So it's all good if, you know, as entrepreneurs, we pride ourselves. This is my job. Like, this is your podcast, but you are not your podcast. Yeah. But imagine you get feedback from someone and be like, oh, your podcast is blah, 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 blah. You're going to take it personally.
Potentially.
Yes. Depending on where you're at.
Yeah.
Right?
No, it's not for them.
Yeah. So, so it depends on where you're at. But I think the biggest thing with how to have tough conversations is understanding, like, what is the intention for me having this conversation?
Yeah.
Where am I coming from? Am I coming to win the argument or win the conversation or the confrontation? Am I coming to prove a point?
Yeah.
Or am I coming from a place of understanding? And a lot of us need to check in before we even have these kind of conversations, because of the fact that usually we're triggered during those situations.
Sure.
So if we're triggered, check yourself.
Yeah.
Like, check in, like, am I emotionally in charge right now?
Yeah.
And if I am, maybe I need to step back and be like, why is this triggering me? Again, like I said earlier, what is the trigger? What is the emotional charge here? And what am I trying to get out of this?
What am I reliving?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how am I trying to prove myself? Because it's either coming from proving, it's coming from a place of like justifying.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't like to be right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us don't like to be wrong. And it's also, where am I leaving this conversation? Like, if I have this conversation with you, is this going to leave our relationship better or worse?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this going to affect how we work in the future?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us need to consider those things before we even open up these kind of conversations.
Yeah. So that's one.
Yeah.
So someone comes at you, and how to navigate that. That's a really sounds like.
So if someone comes at me,
Yeah.
all right. So if someone comes at me, they're angry, they're pissed. Cool. First thing I do, breathe. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I'm not breathing, what I'm gonna do is, if this person's triggering me, first thing I'm gonna do is hold. This
Yeah.
person's fucking triggering me,
Yeah.
right? So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hold. So the first thing I always say is breathe. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Let me breathe and just seek to understand, where is he coming from?
Yeah.
All right. Is there truth in this?
Yeah.
Cool. Where have I actually played a part in what he's saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What am I responsible for?
Yeah.
Right. So those are the first thing I always say. First thing, breathe.
Yeah. Self-regulate.
Yeah. And if you can do that and just sit with it, you can actually tell yourself, actually, I'm actually okay.
Yeah.
It's not that bad.
Yeah.
I'm safe.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm starting to understand this person.
Mm.
And if you can sit there and not interrupt and even validate, sometimes be like, okay, yeah, you got a point there.
Yeah.
The person is going to feel heard. And if the person feels heard, they're
Walls
not going
come
to,
down.
their walls are going to come down. They're going to be like, okay, this person isn't trying to do this to me on purpose.
Yeah.
Or
They're not painting that old enemy's face as their trigger on you anymore.
Exactly. What's the next one you were saying?
No, I think I was going to go for 3, but I think like I even did so much in that. So let's just keep diving into that. I think to take what you said, like the self-regulation piece, just to speak to it before, I noticed like about maybe 15 minutes ago that I was holding my breath a bit because I'm conscious that I usually let out like really nice big exhales, but I think unconsciously I was like stopping myself from doing that into the mic.
Yeah.
And I noticed actually I was starting to like be more on edge, and therefore I was connecting with you less. So I noticed that the breath actually was affecting my ability to connect with you.
Yeah.
And when I actually found that, I brought through a few and just brought myself back down. I was like, oh, here we are. No worries. You know, there's no tiger, you know? But the holding of the breath creates a sympathetic state, which means we turn off our neocortex, which is the connection, reasoning, and, envisioning kind of part of the brain. And we're back into old responses, fight or flight, and, where's the nearest exit kind of vibes. The second piece is I like to kind of adapt or paraphrase or compare, like what I would always say is assume the best. So assume that, here's a good one, like this person, even if what they're doing is like, what's the word? Like unforgivable in my eyes. Let's seek to understand why. Because I believe, let's say you're standing on a street corner and you see a man walk across the road, punch a guy and take his wallet and run away. You'd say that guy's he's a bad man. He's a fucking shit guy, you know? Yeah. But if you knew that there was a guy standing across the road with a big gun pointed at him saying, punch him and take his wallet or I'll kill your whole family. You're like, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, good man, you know? Yeah, like I do it too, you know? Yeah. So what's the loaded gun pointed at someone that's forcing them to behave in a way that we cannot understand, and we would judge their punching and taking of the wallet without the full picture and the full information? So
yeah, that's a beautiful way of... that takes a lot.
Sure, yeah. It takes the regulation.
I was like, that's not your... I get the concept.
Sure.
But I don't know how many people would be like, let me just... What actually made him punch that guy in the face and take his wallet? Like, they're going to be like, first reaction, right?
Yeah.
Natural.
Yeah.
And I think we can be reactional beings, and I think you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you don't, like, this is why meditation, breath work, check in with your body regularly to go, okay, what's actually happening here? Because we are fast to react.
Sure.
We are fast to judge. And it's not always what it seems. But yeah, that is another concept, I think, of like, on another level of understanding.
Sure.
And even still, depending on your background,
Uh-huh.
right? You may have had trauma. You might have been molested as a child. You might have, like, anything could have happened, right?
Totally.
That is personal to you,
Yeah.
right? That has made you react in a way where, like, hang on, wait, that's not fair, right? And something could have been very similar. That person could have looked like your dad
Yeah.
or your uncle.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So there's a few things playing a key part here
Totally.
that we all need to consider.
Totally. I think that assumed the best, though. It's not always available in the moment, maybe, particularly if one of our wounds gets activated. But I find that holding that as a prayer, while also some degree of regulation, allows enough space to not be consumed in our own trigger, and therefore be with the person enough to hear their words and just see them or ask a deeper question. And usually, as I said, it takes one person to put the white flag up, and then the walls come down. So yeah, I love that as a thing. And as you said, then in being able to recognize and see someone, their projection onto you.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure, yeah.
This is cool, right?
Reverse.
You think about it, right? Since we talk about, we live in Bali.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people that are spiritual. There's different types of spirituality, right?
Totally.
Let's talk about the spiritual bypassing.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because you think about it, you know, shit happens every day. But then you get people that will get so caught up in the spiritual realm that I'm spiritual and everything's happening to me and it's all good and it's all divine.
Yeah.
When do we check in to be like, actually, no, I'm creating a whole bunch of this shit that keeps happening?
I have a song called Patterns Don't Lie.
Yeah.
I think it's actually worth cracking it. This kind of sums it up. You tell me that you've done the work when you look me in the eye. Well, words can be deceiving, but your patterns don't lie. Now you're choking back the anger while you're preaching love and light. Bypassing your feelings, but your patterns don't lie. Well, now I don't think you're bad at heart. You're just unaware of the shit that's in your basement that you still need to clear. Well, you told me that you're 34, but now you're acting 5. Hijacked by your feelings, yeah, your patterns don't lie.
Bravo.
So just to break that down, it's like the bypass for me comes in a rejection of bad emotions or bad energy, you know, or bad things, because that's like not how vibe or law of attraction, you know, which kind of misses the point. It's paraphrasing this concept. And it's refusing to accept what is. It's not being real what's there. And, you know, I've noticed that in, you know, again, living in Bali, you know, and you go to different workshops and people, and the languaging and the presentation of oneself all looks perfect. And if I didn't know any better, I would say, wow, that's such a spiritual person. And I had that when I first started on that path. I was going to, like, you know, Lake Atitlan in Guatemala and going to India and, you know, even in Thailand, and being like, oh my God, these people are, you know, wearing these like mala beads and like these crazy pants, and maybe I have to be like that because I'm not spiritual and they are, you know. And then realizing actually that there wasn't much substance behind it. It was more of a front. I believe that the bypass is in the rejection of, as I said, the shadow.
Yeah.
know? So it's about, like, the joke in that song is about like preaching love and light, but choking anger back.
Yeah.
You know?
Really deep down that I'm fucking angry right now. And
but I can't be
you're pissing me
angry.
off, but I can't show it.
Because that's not spiritual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. I mean, you know, I was definitely caught up in it too myself.
Sure,
you
yeah.
know, and acting like it's all good and I've got my shit together and it's sweet, but deep down I'm like, I'm pissed.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to navigate it. So
Sure.
I'm just gonna pretend like I'm gonna take the higher road.
Yeah.
And that for me, I don't trust that.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I see someone that can't express their emotions or,
Yes.
or can't express anger or can't, like, you don't have to play a character all the time. The identity can just allow yourself to be there. And we're human, and some days we're going to act like idiots, and some days we're going to act like at our higher self, and that's part of it, right? And spirituality is being able to go, how can I be myself in all types of environments?
Yeah.
Right? It's the same thing when I was a yoga teacher. I'm like, you don't just get off the mat and then be like namaste, and then next minute you're swearing at someone. It's like,
Yeah,
no,
sure.
it's like, this isn't the point. It's like,
It's clocked off.
Yeah, it's the same thing. You don't just leave church and you're like, peace be with you, peace be with you. And you're all like, holy. And next minute you're like, you're gossiping and you're talking shit about people.
You know?
Yeah, it's like, where is the limit? And I think we have to hold ourselves to a higher degree of like, we're human.
Yeah.
That's not to make an excuse, but to allow every part of our emotion to be seen and witnessed without judgment.
I almost like, there's an analogy of the emotional, like the range of our emotional experiences as, you know, the different crayons in the crayon box, you know? And you know, when you're like a kid and you got like the big pack of 70 crayons, like the stadium of crayons and all the different colors, like, and then there's like some that we're really comfortable in, like red. I love red. I fucking always use red, you know? But then there's like that weird purple thing that never really touch, or that brown gray thing, you know? And that's where we've been obviously brought up and conditioned that certain crayons are really welcome, certain emotions are really welcome, and others aren't. So I believe that actually, like, beyond the bypass, you know, being able to tap back into that full range of crayons leads to being able to color the painting of life with a much more rich palette.
Yeah, which is self-expression.
Totally.
Because it's like, let me use anything I feel.
Yeah.
Right? Not let me use anything that feels or only looks good.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's in the denial of anger that leads to, you know, shadowy behaviors that, you know, ultimately take us away from our authentic expression and our truth, you know, and maybe into coping mechanisms like you spoke about before, like suppression and gossiping and stuff. Like, it's just outlets for something that's just an energy that wants to move.
And it's funny when you think about spiritual bypassing, because the reason why any of us, or probably all of us, come to self-development, come to yoga, come to spirituality, is because we have felt lost, because we have not felt wanted, because we didn't feel enough, because we didn't feel seen, and we were disconnected.
Yeah.
So then we find some path. Maybe it's yoga, maybe it's breathwork, maybe it's coaching.
Yeah.
We learn so much about ourselves.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I never knew this about myself.
Yeah.
We get become overjoyed.
Yeah.
That overjoy turns to like this, I need to keep this feeling. This is amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
I've learned so many tools. And like I said earlier, like new levels, new devils.
Yes.
And that's where the ego can become sneakier. So.
And there's almost this experience of having felt that pain of the being lost. And, you know, the not enoughness. And then we find, it's almost like, you know, growing up in an inner city and then finding a gang. It's kind of the same vibe, you know, it's a way of dressing, it's a way of showing up and how they speak, you know. And the thing is that the fear of being exiled and rejected from this new gang that makes us feel so good, and all the practices around this gang, is that we would then have to face the pain of going back to what we know, and we can't do that. So
and it's even worse.
Yeah.
It's even worse because you're at another level that you have to let go of.
Yeah.
So whenever I teach, because I teach coaches, therapists, and healers as well, to expand their groups as well, whenever I'm teaching them, I'm always like, whenever you receive a compliment or you receive someone like expressing gratitude towards you, receive it, but then let it go. Yeah. Don't hold on to it. Yeah. Because the more you're going to hold on to it, the more harder it's going to be to come back down and ground yourself.
Yeah, but don't block it either. That's the thing. Yeah. It's like there's a balance, because again, if we were to box everything up into a category and label it all, like one side of it would be like the kind of the extreme humility of like, no. Yeah. You know, but it's from a discomfort or maybe a feeling of lack of safety to receive, because what's the motives behind them saying this, you know, but depending on our experience. And this was interesting for me to learn about different people's experience of, take money, for example. I was at a retreat and we had this game where we were given like these dollar bills and we walk around exchanging and giving them to each other. You can walk up to someone and say, can I give you like $300, for instance? You know, it was like $3, but each represented 100. And interesting how people's patterns in money, for instance, started to come through, because it was then the feeling of like, why do I deserve 300? You know, I'm not worthy of it. Or what are they trying to get out of me? You know, and then the people who wanted to give it all away and they felt safe when they gave it all away, and the person who needed to hoard it all and not give anyway because that was their pattern.
That's a cool game.
Yeah, it all comes up. There was a more interesting game that came after, but it's a bit, it was a bit X-rated. So anyway, it was fuck it, I'll go into it.
Why not?
Why not? Sure. So basically, the long story short is everyone puts like, it's real US dollars into this pile in the middle, okay? Middle of the room. And the facilitator says, there's 25 people in the room, all on the retreat. This is day 4, so we're deep in it. And he's like, all right, everyone put half your money in. So everyone does. And he goes, okay, one person from this group will claim this money. And it needs to be unanimously decided who takes it. So one person will claim it and everyone else will agree, and then they'll take it. And if no one claims it, like convincingly, then he takes it back. And it was money that was like included in the retreat fee. So it was like it's free lunch, kind of thing. Yeah. So it started out, funny enough, coming back to the spiritual thing, it started out with like, well, I think this person should get it because they're really nice. I was like, they're nice, yeah, nice. And then there was, well, I'm going to give it to this charity. Oh, wow, yeah, that's great. And then, well, I'll do it and we can distribute it to, the people around town. Oh, that would be, and we can send the good energy, And yeah. And then one guy's like, actually, well, this is my money and I'm going to veto anyone else that tries to take it. Oh, and that was when the fun started, because then we had all the, effectively the projections of people and how they, basically painting capitalism on this guy. Yeah. You know what I mean? And all the things they hate about the patriarchy, and which is fair enough. Like nothing, like there is a lot wrong with the system that we're in. Yeah. And at the same time, it wasn't his fault, But he represented that in that moment. And this is where the trigger comes up and the projection comes up. And there was another woman who said that, actually, I would use this to buy like a nice dress for myself. And if anyone tries to do this charity bullshit, then I'll veto it, And that was, once again, I was like, oh, and I was like sitting there.
Wait,
like,
so what's veto?
Veto is like, if they say, I disagree with this person getting it, then no one gets the money.
Okay.
So they had kind of put their stake in the ground.
Okay, so they're basically, saying like, if I do this and you guys think, then I'm gonna break your plans anyway.
Basically like a power play,
so it fully came in like...
hot. Yeah. So, in the end, it allowed a lot of these shadows. It was like watching like an undulating tapestry of human emotions come up, because there's people crying, there's people screaming, there's people like, it was like people like, but I need this money, it was crazy. It was like full, like down the bit, like the layers to like pure survival energy. It was amazing. And I was just sitting back, because like what everyone seemed to forget was that it was about a personal development retreat. So I'm like, well, obviously the game's there. It's the 10th time he's done this one. So this is obviously there for a reason. So it's not a coincidence. So I'm sitting back, right, wow, look at this. Like, how do we show up when we're all of these, like the money patterns and the projections come up? And that's really it. Like that's where the freedom and the power is, like in being able to be in that when everyone's losing their bananas and to stay centered and regulated. So in the end, for me, it was really interesting to go talk to those two dissenters, I don't know if you've heard or seen that movie, The 12th Man, where there's like this jury that are deciding on this black kid's fate. And this one guy sits there and just like, nah, and one won't give the unanimous vote. And then ultimately one by one convinces them. And then it turns out that the guy actually didn't do it, and they realize, but it's because of that one guy who stood up against it. So when I say assume the best, it's a slightly different context. But in this, I always would seek to understand what is going on behind the curtain for that guy or for that girl, because that's where the growth is. Because I don't understand it. I understand why you're saying charity's great. Like, I get it. And yes, it would be great. And at the same time, what's happening over here?
What did you learn from this guy?
His desire, I think, was to feel what it was, because he kind of got it. I think he got that it was like more than, it was the game was there for a reason. And his story was that he wanted to feel what it was like to be hated by 20 people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then the woman was saying, because she was saying that people were basically bypassing claiming it for themselves. Yeah. They were using the charity as a way to like deflect from their own maybe feelings of not feeling worthy.
Which could also be true.
Totally. But we're not allowed to say that, because to go against the charity, you're a bad person then,
yes. And it's our own stigma. It's like, how do you really know if that person really is going to do that?
Totally. So she was like, well, claim the money and then do what you want with it. Yeah. Don't let that be the reason why you put yourself there, because you're now Mother Teresa to a degree, which is edgy. Like, it's super edgy. Like, because the nature of even saying something like that would leave someone open to, if they had that programming, to be like, oh well, look, they would not hear the logic and be like, no, that's a bad person. He's, how would you not give to charity? You must be evil, that kind of thing, and like the labeling. So this is where I think we really get to deconstruct these programs effectively. These beliefs, the stories that have been written for us, and really, well, I suppose write ones that are more true to us and to our better nature, and find our own truth. Yeah. What would you say has been in the last year the biggest rewriting of a narrative that you've had?
Ooh.
Something you believed to be true and you had to kind of say, oh, right, actually, wow, I got that one a bit wrong. Or, wow, there's a better or an easier way than I thought.
Like the last year, what has changed for me?
Yeah, something that a realization you've had, or a reframe, or a rewriting of a story that you once believed was the way. This is the truth, and then you realized, oh, actually, there's more. Not necessarily I was wrong, but there's more.
Well, the past year I just separated from my partner, and it was a really tough decision because I'm about to be 40 this year.
Wow.
Right.
Wouldn't have picked that.
Yeah. And I had to really make a tough decision, and it was really one of those decisions where I'm either moving forward and we're moving in together and we're going to start to build and create a life together, have children, or I need to stop now.
Yeah.
And I'm still healing through that. It's been about 7 months. I'm still healing through that and allowing the emotions and noticing it. And I feel like I'm actually in one of my biggest transitions right now, where I'm going through it. And it's also the constant conversation in the head of where I think I should be of the conventional life, even though I've chosen not to live the conventional life, and I haven't for the past 20 years.
Totally.
But it still is so deeply ingrained. So, with that happening, 2 weeks later, I broke my hand. You can see that.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
13 screws in there. 2 weeks later.
If you're listening, it looks just beautiful.
Yeah, thanks. So I broke my hand surfing. And what's interesting, my healer told me that this part is a meridian that connects to the heart.
Wow.
And
classically
broke my hand.
It looks like a cool tattoo, honestly.
Thanks.
Nice addition.
It's a cool story.
Yeah.
So the transition with that was like really learning to be with myself and learning to slow down. I'm right-handed.
So you really were fucked.
I was, literally. And I had to be still. I had to be present. I had to honor it.
Yeah.
There was times I wished it was my left hand. And I'm like, why am I wishing that?
Like,
how do you wish that I broke my left hand?
Yeah.
Because I use my right. But it's like, it's happening for a reason. And this is not a spiritual bypass, but it's like, what am I meant to learn from this experience?
Sure.
And even my ending of my relationship, and it was really about going, what is it that I crave in a relationship?
Yeah.
And breaking my right hand, the reason why I'm saying how it's connected is because it's your relationship with your body. How do you do things? Like, I couldn't brush my teeth. I couldn't do certain things with my most dominant hand. Yeah. Which is the masculine, the structure.
Yeah.
And I had to really lean into the feminine and the nurturing. That was what was
and the feeling.
And the feeling, and that's what was being present.
Yeah.
So for me, I think the biggest thing with the transition is really learning how to nurture myself and be present and to slow down and to feel. And that's why I've probably been to more breath work lately as well.
Yeah.
And that's also evoking myself to really be present with these emotions that have really been deep down and suppressed. And the more I go into that, the more I'm starting to realize, I mean, I'm an emotional intelligence coach, but I can be emotional, and really learning to love that part of myself as well.
Yeah.
Instead of just going, I'm learning my emotions so that you can't trigger me, versus I'm learning to allow my emotions.
Yeah.
And if I am triggered, then that's still okay.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, that's a transition I'm in right now, and learning how to love myself again in a way that it's not coming from outside, and really learning how to appreciate and accept on a deeper level.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
Hopefully you won't have to break the other hand to learn that lesson.
I hope so. Knock on wood.
Totally. Emile, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
And if people want to find out about all the great work you're doing, where can they look?
You can find me on Instagram at Emile Steenveld, or my YouTube channel.
Yeah, check out his YouTube.
Yeah.
Emotional Intelligence for Entrepreneurs.
Yes, and it's the same thing at Emile Steenveld. So
Amazing.
thank you, brother. It was appreciating.
Thank you.